Alright, so the newest detail that we're getting in regards to this upcoming Batman game from Warner Brothers Games Montreal is that it will in fact be a reboot to some degree. Now, where the details get a little bit hazy are in terms of how extensive this reboot will actually be. So at the very least, it will be a soft reboot where it still takes place in the same continuity as the previous Arkham games, but it's very much its own self-contained story within the universe. The best example I can actually think of off the top of my head is Pirates of the Caribbean 4, where it's set within the same universe as the preceding films, but in no way does it correlate or relate to the previous films. It's very much its own thing, kind of starting fresh with its own story, but it doesn't retcon anything that has already happened. Now, the most recent things that we've heard have kind of led me to believe that this reboot will in fact be a little bit more extensive than that, to the point of retconning the previous Arkham games. Now, some sources are under the impression that it will retain a lot of the stylistic choices and a lot of the gameplay mechanics of the previous Arkham games, and Sabi went as far as to speculate that the reboot isn't necessarily a reboot on the larger Batman mythology as a whole, but rather just the Arkham iteration of Batman. So it will retcon what's come before, but it will very much still be in the same vein as Arkham. And it might still be called Arkham, in fact. But again, it would retcon everything that came before. Other people seem to think that stylistically, Warner Brothers Games Montreal will do their own take on the characters and the universe, and that it will be even more extensive than that. So there's a lot of different ways that this thing could be rebooted. There's kind of three major ones, and I'll just throw them out again. One, we'll call this the soft reboot, is where it's still set within the universe of the games that came before it, so Asylum City Night, Origins. But it's very much its own story. It's not really connected to those games from a storytelling perspective, even though they're still recognized in the continuity. We have the medium reboot, which is where it would retcon the previous games, but it would retain the gameplay and artistic style of Arkham. And then we have the hard reboot, which would be a completely fresh start for Batman in-game. So it would be Warner Brothers Montreal's game's own unique take on the character, and so it wouldn't have any relation to the Arkham games. Now, the reason that I'm doing this video is that after this information was made available by these sources and insiders that this game will most likely be a reboot to some degree, I had somebody DM me on Twitter and say, I'm really disappointed if this is in fact true that Warner Brothers is going to retire the Arkham universe or retcon it. How are you feeling? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you disappointed? The answer is that I'm honestly really neutral. And my reasoning for that is that Warner Brothers has not let us see anything about this game. We have no idea what it looks like, no idea what the gameplay is, no idea what it stylistically is, and because of that, I can't get excited, and I also can't be disappointed. But I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of potentially doing a reboot to the Arkham franchise. With that said, regardless of how this thing turns out, I think it's a pretty risky move on Warner Brothers' part, and hopefully they are really confident in this game if it is in fact a reboot, because you look at stuff in the past, even Arkham Origins, which was still under the Arkham brand name, really underperformed in comparison to the other Arkham games, and that was from Warner Brothers Games Montreal. Or you look at Batman the Telltale series, which was basically a financial flop. And so to sort of distance this new Batman game from the more successful ones, I think is a very risky move, and only time will tell if it pays off. With that said, I do think that if they include features like the Nemesis system and have some really cool mechanics to play around with, and they do have a very unique and original story to tell, I think they'll be fine. But I'm a little bit concerned that they won't go in that direction. So, the pros of doing a reboot are that you have full control over the story, over the design, over the gameplay, everything. You don't have to link it to Arkham in any way. It can be very much its own thing. You can play around with elements that you couldn't really play around with in the Arkham universe, and you can tell your own story. You can start the timeline fresh so you don't have some of those plot holes. But there's going to be plot holes in any continuity, especially if it's a Batman universe with a lot of stuff like Ra's al Ghul. Like, there's just going to be plot holes. But, you know what I mean. So you can restart it. You can make it more compatible with a larger DC gaming universe. So I get it. With that said, I'm a little bit concerned that this game won't be quite as original as we're all hoping for. So, Sabi mentioned that this still might technically be an Arkham game, but it will be like a reboot of the Arkham continuity. So, my question for that is so will it stylistically and from a gameplay perspective play and look essentially like an Arkham game? Because if that's the case, I don't know why you'd reboot the timeline. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think if you're going to reboot a game or a franchise, it has to be totally earned. I look at the Prince of Persia reboot in 2008, and it was a completely different graphic style. The gameplay was completely changed, and it kept a lot of elements that people enjoyed about the Sands of Time trilogy, but it was very much its own thing. Now, I understand that the Arkham gameplay is really iconic and the character designs are beloved, but if you're going to just keep using those, I don't know why you'd necessarily do a reboot. Now, from a narrative perspective, I can understand why people want to reboot. People are saying, oh, the Arkham games told their story. I'd like to see other elements like the Bat family, like things like that. For me personally, I've always agreed that the Rocksteady trilogy is complete, but the Arkham universe as a whole still has a lot of ground that it could, in theory, cover. I mean, you have the whole gap, really, between from when Bruce Wayne became Batman and the Nightfall Protocol, and even after that. I mean, you can do Bat family games set between Arkham Origins and Arkham Asylum, and you can kind of show how the Bat family fell apart and put Batman in the position that he's in for the Rocksteady trilogy, and you can do kind of a Batman Beyond trilogy after Arkham Knight. So I still think that there's a ton that they could do in the universe, and a lot of the elements that we're looking for in a new Batman game, like potentially a game without the Joker, a game with the Bat family with more dual play elements, with pursuit mode for vehicles but not tank mode. I think that really the Arkham universe still has the potential to cover all that ground in. So I don't know if that's the sole purpose for doing a reboot, why you would necessarily reboot it from the Arkham games rather than just doing a soft reboot in the canon. And I guess that's sort of where I'm at. So I'm okay with them rebooting it, but if they're going to do a reboot, I want them to commit. I want it to be very much their own thing, their own take on it. They can recycle certain gameplay mechanics, but I'd like them to maybe test out and revolutionize some new mechanics, maybe add some new stealth elements. And I think that there's so many ways to approach Batman in a video game. I don't think that you just have to recycle the Arkham gameplay. And if you do, I don't know, I don't even feel like the Nemesis system is necessarily enough to market this entire game on, because that's already been done in both of the Middle-earth games. So if you're going to do new features, you've got to, again, really commit and do some new stuff. I think that if you're not going to take the opportunity to completely change the gameplay and do something different, and show a different version of Gotham and the characters and the design of the world and the universe and tell a completely different story, I don't know why you do a reboot. I really don't understand that. Especially if you're going to still call it Arkham. Like, there's no reason to retcon the other games. I think that it would be kind of a missed opportunity. The best way I can think to describe this in an analogy is it would be like if I were to sit down and write a really, really, really good book, and everyone wanted to see a sequel, and I said, well, actually, I'm going to do something different. Some people would be disappointed I wasn't working on the sequel to the book they loved, but they'd be like, okay, well, at least you're going to write a different book that we can all really enjoy, and it will be really good. But then, say I come out with a book that is essentially written exactly the same as my other book, and it has the same characters and a lot of the same plot lines, and it's structured in the same way. Like, if you're going to do a Batman game reboot, change the formula. Don't make it all in one night. Don't make Joker the main villain of the whole series necessarily. Show us different themes and elements. Maybe give us some Bruce Wayne gameplay. Maybe change the stealth and combat and traversal to some degree. play with the dual play and Nemesis system. Like, do all of that and really make it your own thing. And I know this is getting kind of rambly and I'm just repeating myself, but basically it comes down to, if you want to do a reboot, do something completely different. If you're just going to recycle the gameplay and the style and the graphics, then don't. Keep it within the Arkham canon. But like I said, I'm pretty neutral. I'm good either way. If they want to continue making these Arkham games and keep it within that universe, I'm 100% invested. It's my favorite iteration of the character. If they want to try something new and show me a different take on Batman, again, I'm totally invested and ready to witness a new take on the character, and I think that could be really cool. And if they're willing to put in these new elements, it could be better than the Arkham games. You know, a lot of time has passed since Arkham Knight. It's been 5 years now. So there's a lot of potential, and after seeing games like Spider-Man and Red Dead Redemption 2, which obviously that's a bigger game than this would be, but case in point, you look at those graphics, you look at a lot of the gameplay elements of that, and just how open that world was for you to explore. And if they were able to do something like that, that was that immersive with Batman, that would be incredible. And so the only thing that would really disappoint me is if this is essentially something very similar to what we've already seen, but they strip away what made what we've already seen great. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Would you like to see a reboot? Would you like it to continue the Arkham games? Or are you in the same boat as me, where you're good as long as it's a really good Batman story? Thanks you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.